welcome to a brand new episode of Money Means Business. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we're going to focus on the presidential activities of His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that took place for today in Alexandria, more specifically at the city of Burj Al Arab, and the inauguration of the new premises and the new campus of Senghor University alongside the French counterpart Emmanuel Macron, as well as the other activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for the past week, meeting with the African Development Bank chief to be hosting the African Business Forum in June in the city of Alamein, as well as the discussion of tourism cooperation with the WTTC chief for the past week, and meeting with the Secretary General of the OECD, and to be shedding more light on those important topics that took place for today and for the past week as well. I'm honored to be having with me in the studio for tonight Engineer Sherin and Naggar, the international transport consultant. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Anytime. First of all, we'll be starting from Alexandria, where Engineer Sherin Naggar has come from for today, visiting us here in Cairo. But we'll be starting with the inauguration of the new premises of Senghor University in the attendance of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. As both presidents inaugurated the new campus of the University Senghor, the Senghor University in Burj Al Arab, Alexandria, in the attendance of other African officials. During the inauguration of the new campus of the University Senghor in Burj Al Arab, President al-Sisi asserted Egypt's keen interest to support development efforts in all the African continent and affirmed the Egyptian commitment to support this educational institution. For his part, the French president hailed the Egyptian efforts and participation to inaugurate the new campus of the University of Senghor, adding that it represents a scientific bridge between Egypt and France. An Egyptian-French summit is to take place between the two leaders to tackle boosting the strategic bilateral ties as well as the current conflict in the Middle East. The campus is considered a model of Egyptian Francophone partnership and was designed to meet the latest academic standards to become a hub for education, scientific research and sustainability in Africa. The new modern campus is expected to enhance the university's capacity to host larger numbers of African students and expand the educational program. It was inaugurated in 1990. The Senghor University is a French language international university that offers training on sustainable development in a context of globalization. Named after former Senegalese President Leopold Sédar Senghor, Senghor University hosts around 200 students who are chosen after the selective competition involving more than 3,000 candidates from 25 different countries. Emmanuel Macron's visit to Egypt is the first leg in an African tour that includes Kenya and Ethiopia. And still within the same context, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi asserted the importance of resuming cooperation work with France in the fields of trade, investment, education and transport to achieve the joint interests and boost the strategic relations between Egypt and the European Union. The President's remarks came during the meeting with the French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Alexandria to inaugurate the new campus of Senghor University in Burj Al Arab. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Mohammed al-Shenawi said that President al-Sisi and Macron also held an expanded meeting attended by the two countries' delegations. During the meeting, President al-Sisi welcomed the French President's visit to Egypt, adding that the visit reflects the strength of the strategic relations between Egypt and France, where the two countries share strong military, economic and cultural ties. The meeting also tackled the latest developments in the region and Egypt's pivotal role to end the current conflict in a bid to avoid more escalation in the region. The two presidents also discussed the developments in the Palestinian cause and the Egyptian efforts to implement the ceasefire in Gaza. Talks also focused on the situation in Lebanon and the importance of achieving peace and stability. Engineer Sherin Naggar, as we did see today the inauguration of the University of Senghor, and you are from Alexandria and you know the old campus and the old headquarters of the university. How do you see the importance of building and inaugurating for today the new headquarters for the Senghor University at the city of Burj Al Arab?
Well, this is a very positive step for the Alexandria nationals generally, or particularly, and the Egyptian youth seeking education, yes, also generally for the whole of Egypt. Let me tell you, any addition to an educational institution in this country is always very welcomed. Egypt is in the center of the world, and we need to be aware of the cultures of countries around us, French, British, Italian, Greek, whatever cultures we interact with, yes, will always give our youth and give the next generation a better awareness of the culture of these countries and how to integrate both cultures together for the benefit of both countries and of course for the benefit of our country, Egypt.
Yes, and away from education, the statements of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for today to be trying to be having better and bigger bilateral relations in the fields of investment, in the fields of trade and other fields like transport, for example, between Egypt and France. More specifically, how do you see such a scope of cooperation in the near future?
Well, of course, trade and transport is something vital because both countries are dependent on each other on certain aspects. Like, for example, if we are exporting certain commodities to France, like fresh produce, for example, in the off-season when it's cold in Europe and there's no growth, and at the same time importing from France things like grain and other similar commodities. I'm talking about strictly agricultural production now. Without transport, without adequate transport, this can never happen. So adequate transport is something very important, and there already is a link between a French shipping company that has taken concession on a facility in Alexandria port, and although we are at the moment we are all suffering from the Iran-Persian Gulf situation, yes, yet still there is some progress there. So in general, yes, trade and transport go hand in glove, and without transport there'll be no trade, very simply.
And we have seen the bilateral relations between Egypt and not just France from the European Union, but the European Union in general, to be raising the strategic partnership or the bilateral level to a strategic partnership between Egypt and the European Union. How do you see the future of bilateral cooperation between Egypt and the EU for the years to come, especially with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at the helm, as we have seen, for example, the last visit of President al-Sisi to Cyprus to be attending the informal European Union summit in Nicosia?
Well, cooperation between Egypt and the European Union generally is only set to expand and enhance to a large extent for many reasons. One reason being that Europe at the moment is suffering extensively from both situations, yes, the Ukrainian situation and the Iranian situation, and they have both really dented the economies of Europe, and they have shown the real shortcomings of the European countries, of the European Union generally, mainly because of power shortage. Now, if we are talking about specifically Cyprus and Egypt, yes, Cyprus is part of the European Union, and Cyprus is shortly to become a major gas and energy producer through one of its biggest subsea sea fields, the Aphrodite field. And the Aphrodite field will not be liquefying gas, it will be simply pumping gas into Egypt, one of the Egyptian stations, either Damietta or Etko, where it will be filtered, liquefied and compressed into liquid and then re-exported to the European Union. Of course, that makes Egypt a key player in the whole energy network of Europe, especially after the cutting of all energy ties between Russia and Europe. It will not just affect France, it will affect France, Italy, and primarily also Germany, which is the largest industrial European state, one of the large 5 in the world, and it will help a great deal restructure the energy flow and the energy trading pattern between the European countries and actually between the producing countries, which is Europe, Cyprus specifically, and the hub that will be collecting and distributing that, which is going to be Egypt. And of course, because of the close proximity between the two countries, it is ideal, and we already have our installations in place.
Yes, and speaking about the cooperation and the event for today, it's not just about Egypt and the European Union or Egypt and France, but Egypt and Africa. Today, the university that is being inaugurated, or the new campus of it, is named after a former leader of Senegal, a poet, a cultural icon from Africa, Leopold Senghor. So how do you see the importance of having better and bigger bilateral relations between Egypt and Africa by inaugurating such an educational facility for today?
Well, countries like Senegal and North African countries, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, have all been colonialized by the French, and as a result there has been a lot of French culture infiltrating the African cultures, one of which of course is the French language, and they all speak French. Now, Africa has been regretfully deprived of a lot of things, and despite its extensive and huge wealth, it is a very poorly managed continent generally. It has been exploited a great deal by colonialism, and there's been no development. Now, with the development of a unit or a facility like the Senghor University, you will have African nations or African students who are French speaking. They will find it a lot easier to come over to Egypt, where there is a bit of more familiarity, and they will be not having a problem of a language barrier in that respect. They'll be able to speak French because most of them speak French, so the French language will make the communication with the Egyptian culture a lot easier, and they will be able to integrate and develop their own countries after receiving the education. And don't forget that it's not going to be just a French university. There will be Egyptian influence involved as well, because it is in part of our Egypt, and if a border comes from Accra or from Tema or from Senegal, wherever in Africa where they speak French, he will not just sit there and speak French. He will be integrating, he will be mixing with the Egyptians, mixing with other cultures, and that's what makes Egypt a multicultural state. And I could foresee Egypt as in the next maybe 20-30 years as the metropolitan state of the Middle East, like London or like New York, where you have various nationalities, people living, people studying, especially London, where you have a lot of cultures and a lot of immigrants and a lot of students and so on. So all of that will integrate, and it will make Egypt a much better, a much broader and a much more metropolitan state. The only worry as a person I would express is that we also need to ensure that while this is happening, we ensure that we maintain and retain and protect our own Egyptian identity.
Yes, and we will be heading to the first report of the Money Means Business episode for tonight, focusing on the meeting of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that took place over the past couple of days with the head of the African Development Bank to be discussing the upcoming business forum that will be held here in Egypt, and more specifically in the city of Al Alamein in the month of June. So stay tuned.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the African Development Bank AFDB Group President Sidi Ould Taha discussed Egypt's hosting of the first African Business Forum in Al Alamein in June 2026 during talks on strengthening cooperation and development financing. The meeting comes as economic and geopolitical challenges continue to weigh on developmental efforts across Africa, underscoring the AFDB's key role in mobilizing financing and providing technical support to member states. Al-Sisi, who met Ould Taha in the presence of the Central Bank Governor Hassan Abdullah and senior AFDB officials, reaffirmed Egypt's full support for the AFDB president since he took office in September 2025. Stressing the importance of the bank and its affiliated fund in supporting African economies. For his part, Ould Taha praised Egypt's economic reform program over the past decade and the resilience of its economy in the face of global shocks, noting that Egypt's experience could offer valuable lessons for other African countries. He also expressed appreciation for Egypt's continued backing of the institution and pledged to deepen cooperation with Cairo. Talks focused on the strategic partnership between Egypt and the AFDB group, including ongoing and planned projects under their cooperation portfolio, as well as Egypt's role in supporting the bank's and the African Development Fund's financial sustainability. Al-Sisi also welcomed progress in preparing a new country strategy paper for Egypt for 2027-2031, expressing hope that it would align with national priorities, especially Egypt Vision 2030, and support greater private sector participation as a driver of inclusive and sustainable growth. He further stressed the importance of infrastructure projects across Africa, particularly cross-border initiatives that strengthen regional integration and facilitate the movement of goods and people.
And still reviewing the events that took place for today and for the past week, according to the presidential activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the fields of tourism and international development and cooperation, as President al-Sisi strengthened the tourism cooperation between Egypt and the World Travel and Tourism Council, the WTTC, with the CEO Lefebvre du Voidio, as Cairo prepares to host the Council's flagship Global Leaders Journey event in 2026. The event will bring together 270 senior executives from the leading international travel and tourism companies on a cruise through the Suez Canal and several Egyptian cities and ports, with the WTTC officials described as a strong vote of confidence in the Egyptian tourism sector and stability. The meeting was attended by Tourism and Antiquities Minister Sherin, the WTTC Executive Director Gloria Guevara, Nick Adams, and the U.S. administration's Presidential Envoy for Tourism. Lefebvre du Voidio said that the decision to hold the Global Leaders Journey in Egypt reflected the growing international confidence in the country's diverse tourism offerings, security environment, and the ongoing efforts to develop the sector. He said that Egypt remained the preferred destination for the international travelers and investors, adding that the WTTC was keen on deepening the cooperation with the Egyptian government in tourism development and investment. During the meeting, Nick Adams conveyed the greetings from the U.S. President Donald Trump to President Sisi and affirmed Washington's interest in increasing tourism exchange between the two countries. Sisi reiterated the Egyptian commitment to further developing the tourism sector in pursuit of the state's target of attracting 30 million tourists annually. Engineer Sherin Naggar to be hosting the Global Leaders Journey in 2026. So Egypt is becoming a destination for the international flagship conferences and events. One of them is for tourism. How do you comment on such an event?
Well, let me comment about El Alamein first.
Yes.
El Alamein has for the last 80 years reflected or has been the symbol of human brutality and human slaughter between the various warring sanctions in World War II.
Yes.
And has remained as such for quite a number of years. Now El Alamein is looking at a totally different thing, or looking totally different, because it is looking from, hey, behind us is the remains of what is it, 175,000 tombs sitting or graves in El Alamein of various nations, but in front, what have we got? Oh, we got a civilization, we got people who are welcoming all types of nationalities.
Yes.
We are holding conferences, we are having hotels, we are building a civilization that if anything it reflects that we as Egyptians especially, although we have not been a party to it, we have learned our lesson from World War II for sure. So this is for a start a very positive sign in favor of Egypt as a country. The other thing is that El Alamein is not so far away from the new Egyptian museum, the Grand Museum.
Yes.
And it is very simple to have a cruise ship coming into El Alamein, taking a tour, a day tour, day return tour, and what you're seeing the Egyptian museum, although one day for Egyptian museum of course is far from enough.
Yes.
But at least they will see something, and it will encourage them to come back once, twice and 3 times. So it's not going to be a one-off trip to the Egyptian Museum. So really the coordination between those two, this is where tourism comes in very handy. Yes, we have a lot of new buildings in, we have the North Coast is becoming very developed and very advanced. And most important is that we can also host our Europeans during the winter.
Yes.
And again, although it might be a curse to some people, the decline of the Egyptian pound compared to the foreign currencies, the devaluation, yet it is still a blessing, because Europeans can always spend the winter, the very cold winter in Europe, they can spend it in Egypt using those abandoned homes, because these homes in the North Coast are completely empty during the winter.
For us, yes.
For us Egyptians that will be too cold. For Europeans it will not be as cold, and not be cold at all for that matter. Not only that, the cost of living in Egypt for a whole month for a couple could barely match the cost of only heating in Europe in a cold winter. So this is a new attraction for Europeans to come and live in Egypt during their cold winter days, and be sure they'll be coming year after year after year. Of course, we're talking here about pensioners and people who are not really resident, they don't have a job to do in winter in Europe, of course. So Egypt has got a lot to offer, a lot more than, I mean, if I start talking about what Egypt has to offer, we're going to spend the night here. So, you know, this is part, just when you talk about El Alamein, El Alamein is a nucleus. It's a very good example, as I said, of war and peace, and how the Egyptians managed to turn brutality into peace and prosperity.
And speaking about the tours that could be taken, because we have just read that that there will be the global leaders journey in 2026. It will be passing through the Suez Canal, according to the statements of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the head of the World Travel and Tourism Council that took place for the past week. Would you tell more about the latest about the Suez Canal? Because we have seen the statements of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stating that we have been affected negatively over the revenues of it and for the past couple of weeks, and more specifically for the war against Iran by the United States and Israel.
Yes, well, from an outsider's point of view, I mean, I don't speak for the Suez Canal naturally, but yes, as an Egyptian and as someone who is dealing with the Suez Canal, we are not talking about a waterway where pilots come on one end and take a ship across to the other end, escorted by a couple of tugboats. That's not the Suez Canal. That is only a minor part of the Suez Canal, although it represents the bulk of its income. But if you look at the Suez Canal generally, Suez Canal is a giant in its own right. They have shipyards, they have just been building shipyards, and I'm proud to say that Italian companies have actually bought 2 of their tugboats, and it's been reported on the market, and they bought them for a very good price, and there's more to come. So the shipbuilding side of it which has never been known about the Suez Canal in the past, now is becoming known, and in fact Europeans again are getting to know more about the shipbuilding part of the Suez Canal. One of the tankers has been very badly damaged by the Houthis and came into Suez severely damaged, and in record time and to the highest specs, that ship was repaired and went on its voyage, completed its voyage safely, and no complaints made. That is ship repair. You're talking about activities like they have their own tourist company, they have their own investment company.
The Suez Canal Development Axis, how do you see the future of it nowadays?
The Suez Canal Development Axis is the future. And the reason for me saying that is that we have seen how vulnerable the entire Gulf, and I'm sorry to say that the Gulf is very vulnerable. I mean, today when the Iranians are blocking Hormuz and they're fighting with the Americans over who manages Hormuz and who controls it and who masters it, what has really happened is that you found that Jebel Ali is suffering severely, Dubai is suffering severely, Abu Dhabi is suffering severely, Bahrain, Qatar, for example, Qatar is suffering very heavily because they can't get any of their oil out. So Kuwait and Iraq, so all countries, maybe Saudi Arabia is suffering, but Saudi Arabia has got other access. I'm talking about the countries that are locked only to the Persian Gulf.
Yes.
And that is exactly where we come in as a substitute, because we are actually en route between north and south. We are closer. We do not need to be deviating the traffic between Egypt, between say India or China for that matter, and Europe. There's no deviation, whereas in the past there used to be a deviation into the Hormuz Strait. You're talking about several days deviation. But the Gulf countries have really built up tremendous infrastructure, which at the moment I'm very much afraid to say it is going into waste. If that continues, that conflict continues, it is going to waste. However, as we say, sometimes bad for people, good for other people, and that will encourage a lot of capital, a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs to come into Egypt and to come into the Suez Canal economic zone. People with the mining, for example, we have another problem. A lot of people talk about the Hormuz Straits as a crisis of energy. It is not just a crisis of energy. It's worse even is the crisis of fertilizers, because most of the fertilizers manufactured are manufactured in the Gulf. But then where is the substitute? Oh, the substitute is the Golden Triangle, Egypt. So people who are investing a lot in fertilizer industry in the Gulf and they cannot get the cargo out, they will shy away from there and they will come to Egypt, where you have the raw material right under your feet. So that will be another, so you're not talking just about the Suez Canal Economic Zone, you're talking about the Suez Canal Economic Zone, you're talking about the mining sites generally, and most important, talking about the Golden Triangle, which is the mining hub of Egypt.
Yes, and for the last top story and for the last presidential activity of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that took place for the past week, President al-Sisi received the Secretary General of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, Mr. Matthias Cormann. The meeting was also attended by Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and the Egyptian expatriates, Dr. Badr Abdulati, and the Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Dr. Ahmed Rustum. Representing the OECD were Director of the Center for Tax Policy and Administration at the OECD, Ms. Manel Corwin, and Deputy Director of the OECD Global Relations and the Cooperation Directorate, Mr. Karim Dahu. Spokesman for the Presidency Ambassador Mohammed al-Shinawi said that President al-Sisi welcomed the Secretary General's visit, emphasizing the Egyptian appreciation for the long-standing cooperation with the OECD across various economic and developmental fields. The President also expressed appreciation for the support provided by the organization towards Egypt's economic reform efforts and the pursuit of the comprehensive development, particularly through the ongoing country program established in 2021. President al-Sisi confirmed that Egypt seeks to further develop the partnership with the OECD in the spheres of economy, investment and the enhancement of competitiveness and governance, thereby contribute to the economic and the institutional reform efforts. The President also reviewed the state's endeavors to bolster the role of the private sector in the development process and to incentivize the foreign and domestic investment by upgrading the relevant institutional frameworks. Dr. Sherin, Engineer Sherin, two important topics to be discussing within this event. One of them is the economic reform program that was undertaken by Egypt for the past decade or so, because we can see that we are bearing the fruits nowadays to be having more investments, foreign direct investments coming easily because we have done the hard work for the past decade. How would you comment on this?
Well, we have definitely gone a long way, especially in infrastructure, because no investor will come to Egypt without infrastructure, or to any country for that matter. That is one thing. We have definitely gone a long way. One remark I need to make as an engineer, how are we, and this is a question I'm asking the Egyptian government, if I may, how are we doing when it comes to maintaining what we have built? We have been building roads, we have been building bridges, railways, factories, you name it. All these do not just sit there and get built and stay there forever without being properly managed and properly maintained.
Yes.
And my question to the Egyptian government, how are we doing with that? How are we doing about that? I have seen, as a person who goes around the roads a lot, there's been a lot of roads, or several roads, that have been very recently inaugurated, and when you go and drive over them these days, maybe 1.5 years or 2 years, you find them in a miserable state, I regret to say. So what as an engineer, as a professional engineer, what I'm saying, what are we doing about upkeep? What are we doing about maintenance of all that money we have been spending on our infrastructure? Because if our infrastructure is not maintained, within the next 2 years it won't be there. We will start from square one again. So that is my only critic about the Egyptian infrastructure building. But generally, no, we are definitely suited, and we are definitely well prepared for it. And I think over the next few months you will see that we will see India, and we will see a lot of land corridors crossing Egypt. We have several people say these are threats to the Suez Canal and these are threats to the Egyptian economy. Quite to the contrary. No, for example, the EMEC, which is the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor E, which is Egypt, passing through Egypt, going from the Gulf of Oman or from a place like Sohar in Oman, railing all the way across Saudi Arabia and then across Egypt, and then continuing rail into Europe. Without a proper and an adequate rail network, this could never take place. We could never compete. I would not even dare say, oh, we have a rail network, because actually the rail network, being the second in the world, or being the second established in the world, at one stage became totally pathetic. And now it has become an international and a proper railway network. Again, please, what is being done about maintenance? That is extremely important, because it will return being pathetic if we don't maintain it. So that is one thing. Another thing, we have the One Belt, One Road, which is going through the port of Gwadar into Pakistan and is only across the Gulf of Oman from the port of Sohar.
Yes.
And the same network can also be carrying the Chinese goods into Europe. But we are not just here talking about Europe. You'll be mentioning Africa, you'll be mentioning the president being very concerned with Africa,
yes,
and being very interested in developing further business with Africa. There is your chance in Africa. Egypt is the hub of Africa, and you can connect India with Africa, you can connect China with Africa, you can connect Europe with Africa, and you can connect the Commonwealth overall with Africa. Now I'm talking about Commonwealth here being Canada, being New Zealand, being Australia, all these, combining the networks together with the land bridges, you can build up a massive network that will connect the Commonwealth, China, India, Australia, Canada, and of course America, all to Europe and to Africa. And these are the two parameters that you really need to focus on: Europe and Africa. Africa even more than Europe.
And speaking of Africa, the African Business Forum will be held in the month of June here in Egypt, as you mentioned, Engineer Sherin Naggar, in the city of Al Alamein. How do you see the importance of such a business forum linking Egypt to Africa even more for the future?
Very important, because first of all, Egypt is a member of COMESA. I'll just give you one example of how important that can be.
Yes.
Egypt is a member of COMESA, and a lot of East African countries are a member of COMESA, East African countries. Now, we are talking again here of the bridges and the corridors that are being in consideration at the moment, which I'm sure will be discussed in that forum. Now, with these corridors being discussed, you're talking here about linking Africa, COMESA. And what is COMESA? COMESA is an African organization, but members of COMESA happen to be members of the African Commonwealth. So you are talking here about, you're combining African Commonwealth with COMESA. And if you are linking that with India, then you are talking about Asian Commonwealth. And if you are coming from Gwadar, from Pakistan, then you are linking again Asian Commonwealth. But the Suez Canal Authority is handling the traffic between Canada and America through the Suez Canal to the west. So then you have the crossroads between the land corridor and the maritime corridor. And the same goes for Australia and New Zealand. So there you are combining the entire network of a Commonwealth which never existed in the past to become a strong common network,
yes,
for a trading network for the Commonwealth. Commonwealth is a desperately needed economic setup for Britain, especially after Brexit. So that is one thing. Now combine that with the efforts into China, which has not really been very successful, into Africa. Egypt is the gateway, so the Chinese will be benefiting a great deal from that. India, the same, will become benefiting a great deal from that. So this corridor will bypass all the nonsense and all the hassles taking place in Hormuz, yes, and the Israeli-Gaza conflict, and all the conflicts in Syria, in Iraq.
What is happening in the Middle East, and more specifically in the Strait of Hormuz? Has it affected Africa as well as a continent? And speaking about the economic burdens and the economic pressures that have been applied to the rest of the world, to the US, to Iran, of course, to Africa in general, and Egypt in specific. But in Africa, how can Egypt help to be alleviating those economic burdens on the African citizen?
Africa has all suffered from this conflict, and also from the Ukraine conflict.
Yes.
For a very simple reason is that Africa is very much dependent on its in its food on imports of grains and food from places like actually Ukraine and Russia, together with many other countries like France, mainly for the food commodities. Now, if you're talking about suffering more because of the energy crisis, okay, that's another action. The worst hit country all over, unfortunately, is Egypt. And despite all the efforts that the Egyptians are exerting, the Egyptian government is exerting, and the president personally is exerting, in order to develop and enhance the economy, he gets one hit after the other. First of all, you have the coronavirus, and then you have the Ukrainian war, and then you have the Gaza conflict, and then you have the Hormuz situation, and on top of that, of course, you have all the refugees, where you have almost 10% of your population is refugees.
Yes, about 10 million.
Well, exactly, and when we're 100 million, so we're about 10 million. Yes. In fact, 10 million is the official figure. You don't know how much unofficials are there.
Yes, exactly. Engineer Sherin Naggar, the international transport consultant, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Money Means Business.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of Money Means Business for this week. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.